Buenos dias. Again from Mexico, where it's going to be 88, 89 degrees today, a typical temperature this time of year, as it might also be in Pennsylvania. And on a day like today, both in Pennsylvania and in Mexico, if you go out on the road, you're likely to see a motorcyclist. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you're not a motorcyclist yourself, but when one motorcyclist passes another motorcyclist on the highway, they almost always put their hand out to wave. It's a kind of code of behavior expected of motorcyclists. Motorcyclists are a group of people, and they break down into smaller groups in the U.S. between Japanese motorcycle owners and American, which is to say Harley-Davidson owners, with the former being slightly looked down by some Harley owners. And so it's a way of opening our class today because what we're talking about is identity and subgroups. And the main thing that makes a subgroup and not a culture, according to the book, is that when you have a subgroup, the values that go with that group of people are not passed down to future generations. So a subgroup exists kind of horizontally in time and does not have a lineage to it. That's what we're going to talk about today. That's the book's definitions. You can probably tell that I'm a bit skeptical myself because I believe in the case of motorcyclists, for example, that they will have a lot of values. Let's say one is tattoos. A lot of motorcyclists have tattoos. And is that a value, the idea of displaying what they would consider to be art on their body and then passing it down to somebody who is their offspring through the motorcycle group? It's a question that I think is at least worth raising. Now, speaking of the terms that I use there, jargon is the next thing that I want to go to. It's really talking about language as a way that a group maintains itself and by which you get entrance to that group. Because groups use their own language, right? Once you learn the language of whatever group it is you're joining, let's say it's a sport, and you learn all about how to talk about that sport. Or let's say it's, in my particular world, broadcasting, and you get into a radio station and you hear words like crossfade, you hear sliders, and other words. It becomes part of the language of the people, not only as a way for them to hang together, excuse me, but also as a way of gaining entrance into the group. Once you can speak the language, then you are a full-fledged member. Within different language categories that bind subgroups, we have the jargon category, and that's just using words that are just unique to whatever your particular group is. If you're a group of workers and you're going out every day to do landscaping, then you're going to have a certain way of saying, did you load the truck? You're going to have a way of saying, did you get the pool chains? There's a lot of terms that will be used that go along with that particular job. So that's just general, is jargon, but it is unique to a particular group. Where we get into the fascinating parts of group cohesiveness, in my opinion, is when we talk about the argot. The argot is the next term that we talk about. And that's where the group has a secret language that only they have access to and only they know, and it has very clear meanings. So gangs in the U.S. use argots all the time, and there was a gang member that unfortunately got on the radio station at ESU many years ago now, and actually called out his CO, corrections officer, in his statement by saying, why don't you come up to my room, take off your badge, and be real. One could argue that is an argot that is so strongly coded to mean only one thing, come up and let's have a physical fight, that it's part of the way that the language is communicated so clearly. So if you look at argots as a means of people binding together and have a secret language, you do that even as teenagers when you're trying to say things around your parents that you don't want them to know that you're going to be doing with your plans that day or whatever. For example, you're not going to say, I'm going drinking, if that's what you're going to do, especially if you're underage. You're going to find a way to use an argot for that. So now let's move on to different examples. And the book chose these, so we'll work with some of them, examples of subgroups and the kinds of identities that go with these subgroups. And then I will make some comments about Mexican subgroups when we get to one of the dimensions of the chapter towards the end of this instructor video lecture. So the first one that the book decides to talk about, to use an example to show you what subgroups look like in terms of their identity, is working class people. Working class people, people who use their hands, people who use tools, people who fix things, make things, people who shape things. Those are the kinds of people that are working class people, not the people in offices on the telephone, not the people typing on computers, although there are some clerical jobs that would be considered working class. We're talking about people who are physical, like the landscapers that I mentioned earlier. This is a group of people that the book is arguing comes together by virtue of what they do with their hands. And so they all have certain elements to them, or many people in this subgroup have elements to them that you would say cause the identity of this group to be what it is. So, for example, many of them will be loyal Americans and be very vocal about demonstrating their pride. So holidays like 4th of July, or bumper stickers that they put on their vehicles, or the way that they enthusiastically pledge allegiance to the flag or sing the national anthem. These are behaviors that might commonly be associated with working class people. So it's an example of a subgroup, and working class people also are people that are striving to improve their situation, as opposed to a person in a white collar situation might be saying, I'm, at least on the outside, I'm supposed to be satisfied. But a working class is striving to improve their situation, another dimension that defines that subgroup. Now let's go on to the next one, which is British punk. British punk, it happened during my lifetime. It was a reaction to rock and roll, in particular 1970s rock and roll, which British punk had formed itself against because rock and roll was seen to be safe and no longer taking chances and exploring new musical boundaries, and there was a lot of repetition amongst bands and sounds. So British punk came out with a completely different style of clothing, dyed spiked hair and very tight fishnet clothing, and earrings and other piercings and tattoos, and it just broke the mold of what the then pop artists, which would be rock artists, were seen as. So British punk is another example, and you would see people who, if they wanted to be a member of this group, they would have to listen to certain music, they would have to dress in the kinds of style that I just described to be a member and to have that identity with the British punk group. Another culture, well, not another culture, but another subgroup, which the book decides to call a subculture also, is corporate cultures. Corporate cultures, this is sort of the fabric of the United States because most of us are working so hard. We've identified that in an earlier class, that Americans are said to be working to live, living to work, and Europeans say, well, we are working to live. Our work lives are very, very prominent in our lives. We only get 2 weeks of vacation on average, and many of us don't take those 2 weeks. And when we do, we're often doing work on vacation. The average European, 5 to 6 weeks vacation every year. And when you go away, you're not in touch with your office. It's downtime so that you can come back replenished. But we have a different work ethic in our culture. So within that, we have a corporate culture as well. And that is, once you start to work for a company, you're going to be exposed to symbols in the country or heroes in the company, framed photographs of company founders or people who made the decision that really allowed the company to take off. So you've got heroes. You've got rituals, like you've got the company banquet, or you have the dress down Friday, or whatever it is. It's a regular part of the behavior at that company, becomes part of your life. And so corporate culture is very interesting as well. And especially when you work alongside somebody for many, many years, as I have at ESU, there is most definitely a culture at ESU and many cultures within it. And I can just say that overall, it's an experience that is very worth having. I have a lot of very great colleagues and friends that I enjoy seeing on a daily basis. And I have to say that that's part of ESU's, quote, corporate culture, even though it is an institution of higher education. All right, now I'd like to move on to the subject of homosexuality. The author, I know, is homosexuality. This is homosexual, or he would perhaps describe himself as subscribing to queer theory. More about that in a moment. So I know that this was an important subject for him. Remember, I was his colleague at Cal State San Bernardino, Fred Yount, and he points out that homosexuality and the way that it's used varies widely across countries. Not just in terms of the actual physical intimacy, but also the way that people conceptualize themselves. For example, there are certain areas of Latin America and areas of Africa where male-to-male sexual contact is not considered to be homosexual. If you were to ask the male, they would say, no, I'm a heterosexual, but this is part of a way of mentoring, which actually started in ancient Greece. So the way that homosexuality is conceptualized and practiced vary widely across the world. One thing to keep in mind is homosexuality is different from the word gay. Gay is about shared beliefs between sexually alike people. But it does not necessarily mean that sexuality is involved. So a gay relationship is more about values and sharing beliefs. For example, two people care about the environment and making sure that every way, shape, or possible in their lives is dedicated towards not wasting things. That's a value, and that would be an example of a particular belief that might be held by two gay and other people as well. We know that, and this is no surprise, that in countries where religion is very, very prominent and strict, we know that those countries tend to have a low tolerance towards homosexuality. No surprise there. Similarly, we know that countries that have high masculinity in them, like the one I'm in right here in Mexico, you also have a more negative acceptance of gays. And I can tell you, I've been coming here for 10 years to Mazatlan, very machismo. The males look very strong. They have to be to survive in this weather. It gets so hot during the summer, and most of the jobs are physical working jobs, like working at the resorts and working in the food industry, unless you're going to sell timeshares. But most of the jobs are constructing things down here, and just the wall behind me that you see was made with hands. It wasn't made with machines. There's bricks behind it. I saw it made. There are bricks behind it, and the Mexicans are carrying these bricks. They're cementing the bricks. They're putting the smooth cement over the top of the bricks. It's all done by hand, and it's very typical in Mexico. In Mexico, homosexuality is not very open. If you go downtown to Mazatlan, and this is a place that has 500,000 people, so it's a big strip of 14 miles of land, you will find just a couple places that are sort of wink and a nod gay places. So they don't have a name that is necessarily saying that it's going to be a gay bar, but it's known to be that way. And in those two isolated places, you will see people sort of openly expressing their affection for each other. They might arrive holding hands, not so much men as women. So in a country like Mexico, high masculinity country, there is a more negative acceptance. If you accept the idea that more homosexuals would like to be able to explicitly express their affection for each other in more public settings than those two places that I mentioned. And actually across the world, in 76 countries, there's about 200 countries, but in 76 countries, you have criminalization against same-sex relations. So it's against the law to have same-sex relations, including some really draconian countries like Sudan, where you can be put to death, and Uganda, for having same-sex relations. And there is some dispute, but most people who follow Islam do believe that the Book of Quran does disallow homosexuality. So it's widely interpreted that Islam disallows homosexuality. It's just not possible. Now, in terms of the improvement of the prospects of people who are homosexual who have been traditionally discriminated against, there have been some recent big gains. For example, as the book properly points out, there are certain words that used to have such a bite and a dig to them of name calling and irrational fear that somehow have changed their meanings. They are not as strong or harsh today. So those words the book mentions are dyke, faggot, and lesbian. Now, those words used to be an automatic, complete disrespect, but actually those words became embraced by members of the gay, lesbian, transgender, transsexual community and used it as commentary by themselves. They're sort of seizing their own language. Much like the N-word has been commandeered by rap artists to do the same thing. They're going to make their own commentary using these own demeaning words. So that has changed things somewhat for members trying to overcome prejudices against homosexualities. As the book points out, othering has been the main problem. Othering is a way of separating somebody else and saying that they're other and therefore different and dangerous and not normal and a lot of other things that go along with being the other. Anything other than the thing that you're in, the main culture, is the other. That's when you start to target groups and push them into areas of irresponsibility. And in actual fact, we have homosexual rights are as active in the United States as in any country. And the business market is very well aware that there are some predictable trends amongst some homosexual populations in terms of their consumer behavior. Approximately 6 to 10% of the consumer market is targeted towards a gay or lesbian or otherwise sexually ambiguous lifestyle. And so this is where I want to finish the point, because queer theory was mentioned earlier as an alternative to viewing homosexuality. If you accept the idea of homosexuality, queer theory says you are in essence accepting a binary argument, that you are either male or female. Even if you're male, you prefer males, and females prefer females, it's still a binary choice there. It's either or. Queer theory actually says that people in terms of masculinity and femininity fall along a continuum. I mentioned this in an earlier class. So some people can be extremely masculine and others can be less masculine, but still male, still don't want to use that word heterosexual, but still prefer females, and so on down the line. And so queer theory suggests that words like homosexuality are not appropriate or useful to describe this subgroup within the United States and with other countries. And in fact, on the campus of ESU, I've noticed more and more it's LBTQ. I think LBTQ, those 4 letters as a common acronym are being used. So it's interesting watching how the language by the group itself and members outside of the group are evolving and are continuing this idea that we're learning about in this class on identity and subgroups. But until then, that's going to do it for now. I hope you have a great day.